Really?
Good. Yeah.
You can hear me?
Yep.
All right, we're live.
Actually, I think your internet sucks.
Really?
Yeah.
Just the rework. The connection seems fine.
Okay. Hey,
Your
Dax,
video
does
is
he
a
look
little
a bit?
laggy, but
Yeah.
Actually,
at
I
least the
don't. I
audio
don't
is
think
fine.
that. Yeah, I think that might have just been like Chrome. Let's give it a second.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. Let's start.
So how do we want to do this?
All right. Let's do this. Hey, Dax, do you have anything new to show? Like since last time we demoed, any changes? I have a list of questions I can go. I can start firing off. But if you have any changes, we could take a look at that.
No,
first.
I don't think there's any major changes. The only thing I did was integrate some of the code building stuff, the code gen stuff into the CLI. But aside from that, I don't think so.
Yeah. So I was playing around. I added like a profile page, and I was playing around with the repo. I was thinking, what is the goal for us to evaluate whether GraphQL stack, being the ideal stack, is it up there or is it not there yet? I was thinking it might break down into like 3 areas that I'm on running across you guys to see if that makes sense. One is have like a clear separation of responsibilities. This like domain-driven thing you were talking about, Dax, where it should be very obvious how the files are structured. Auto-gen stuffs in the GraphQL, the backend stuff's broken down into migrations, backend and the core database models and stuff. I think right now it is very clear, so that is good. The second point is how easy it is to add a new feature. So I was kind of trying to evaluate that in like number of files to that would touch to add a feature, and I guess we want to minimize this. And the third one is the how clean the folder structure is. Try to like minimize, say, the number of files you have in the repo. I guess this matters more when you first clone it, right? When you first clone the project, how many concepts you need to learn by just observing the folder structure. I kind of rank them in the order I was saying them. First, it has to be clear separation of responsibilities, and then it has to be super easy to add a new feature, and then it's a cleanness of the folder. I want to run it across you guys to see if you have other goals we should try to achieve by discussing this ideal stack, or are those 3 points make sense?
Yeah, I think I don't know if we want to call out the type safety as its own thing. I don't know if there's like too much more to do there, but I think that's like another dimension that we can always improve stuff on. Outside of that, no, I think the areas you covered are pretty broad. So I think most stuff goes into one of those 3 categories.
If that's the case, so my questions are mostly revolving around can we reduce the number of files, or can we reduce the number of steps to add a file without having a trade-off of clear responsibility of
Yeah.
All right, so if we're diving into the repo, I see like there's a builder.ts and a schema.ts inside functions GraphQL. Like, can we make them the same file, or is there a reason why they're separate?
Should we share?
Yeah. Can we start by share? Yeah. Let's go over the actual. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
By the way, say hi to the people that are watching.
Everyone, I see the people saying hi in the chat.
This adds a lot of pressure. I think it makes me to. I have to raise my IQ level by 20 points.
Well, that's good.
I was gonna say it has to fix your hair or something.
Yeah, that's gonna be something superficial. Okay.
Yeah, David Martin says he's here to add pressure.
All right. Yeah. So you're referring to, we have this, look, the builder file shows up now. Remember, it wasn't showing up on my editor the other day. Okay, yeah, so we have both the schema and the builder. So the question is, what happens if we move? Okay, yeah, so the reason I did, oh, this is the same. Oh, okay, the one on the left is a builder, and the one on the right is a schema. So the reason this can't just go into this file is that this creates a circular dependency for this. The article will import builder, but it's also like imported here. So that's why it has to go in separate files. This file will also, I think, theoretically get bigger if people are using where you configure like the Pothos plugins and a bunch of other stuff. And this file on the right will get bigger as your schema gets more. Yeah, so it's primarily the server dependency thing.
I see.
Actually, Frank, before we go ahead a little bit, just maybe to set the agenda. So how did you want to do this? You had some questions, and then did you want to take some questions from the community? Like how would or the other way I was sort of thinking is like maybe do a quick refresher again for people that obviously maybe didn't watch the first one, and then dive into the questions.
Okay, let's do that.
Okay, maybe Dax, you can just do like a quick summary, plus maybe some changes that you made since the last one, and then we can dive into the questions, and then we'll take questions from the community. Anybody that's watching, you can just like put your questions in there. If they happen to be sort of like very similar to the ones that Frank is asking or that we're bringing up, we'll address them on the spot. If not, we'll do it after. But yeah, I don't want people to hang around for like 2 hours and nothing happens to their questions. So maybe set some agendas, I guess.
Yeah, cool. That makes sense. We should have done that. So I guess for people that are a little less familiar, we're working on effectively a starter for SST. It starts off as a basic SST app, but it's more focused around what is the best experience we can provide for a full stack serverless application. So there's a bunch of different technologies that we're combining together, and we're trying to assemble it in a way where we can see it being pretty easy to get started, but also if your application gets really complicated, 2-3 years down the line, bigger team, it should more or less work the same. So in the last video, I demoed kind of my initial take on it. It's mostly a GraphQL backend. The front end in this starter is React, but we're not going to be doing too much on the front end in terms of what we're mandating. So this is mostly good backend structure and like a way to make it end-to-end type safe with the front end, regardless of what front end you're using. So I think in the last demo, there's not a lot of major changes to this project. We just moved some of the code that was in this project into SST, so it's a little bit more invisible. So a lot of the code gen stuff has been moved out into the CLI. So anytime you make changes to the GraphQL stuff, it'll automatically get code gen and it's kind of invisible. But other than that, I think the idea was I kind of finalized this and I shared this on Monday, and Frank took it and went and tried to build some stuff. And I think we're here to talk about any rough edges, anything that's kind of tedious that we can improve, kind of the categories that Frank talked about, and anything else anyone else might have to bring up.
And what are some of the things that you, I guess, worked on what are some of the changes that you made since the last one?
So it was really just, I think to this project, there's not any major changes. We cleaned up some of the files as we moved them into the CLI. So this should be hidden, but like all the code gen stuff was more in your face here before, but yeah, it's all gone. remember from the previous thing, we had like CodeGen scripts in here and everything, but yeah, it's all moved to being part of SST now. Oh, I guess the other stuff we did, actually, I'm remembering now. I think you asked me twice, but we also decided that instead of having a standalone GraphQL API construct, it made more sense just to expand the capabilities of our normal API construct to let you specify some routes that are GraphQL based. I think we went over the ideas for that on the call. We actually went and implemented it in this one. So we have this new type Pothos route where you can point it to a GraphQL handler, and then you can kind of specify some of the CodeGen stuff you want here. So the schema that we want to CodeGen from, the output where like you want the official GraphQL schema to be dumped out into, and then any commands you want to run after. So we're using GenQL for the front end, but people have all sorts of things they want to generate off their GraphQL schema. So you can add that here, and in local development, any changes to anything on the GraphQL side in TypeScript will trigger these commands. So it's all implemented now, and I think it's working pretty well.
And maybe on point, I don't know, Frank, if you want to talk about this one, but it's just to sort of summarize the reasoning behind why did we go with the API construct route or expanding the API construct as opposed to doing a separate one. I think both of you can sort of take it on, but maybe Frank, if you want to jump in. Yeah, I think you're muted, Frank.
Yes, I just have a stuffed nose, and don't people hear me keep sniffing my nose? Yeah, I think as more and more we work on it, it becomes more apparent that very often for an app you have both the GraphQL routes and the RESTful routes. Like example is, yeah, you could be building like a full-on GraphQL, but the moment you build some sort of callback, like a Stripe callback, Slack callback, GitHub callback, you need a RESTful route. And it doesn't make sense to have two standalone, API constructs or like API projects into your API gateway, right? It makes a lot more sense to just have one endpoint and you just have a /GraphQL route, and you can add additional RESTful routes on top of it. And what kind of Dax showed there with the type being Pothos is because I think we want to provide like a pretty good experience on right, if you're using Pothos or if you're using some other like GraphQL like schema builder or like server, right? We want to kind of provide more like out of the box experience. So we could have other types down the road, but for now we're focusing on Pothos, and all the CodeGen stuff are kind of built around it.
Yeah, and I guess to add to the Pothos one, it's not so much so that we went out and we picked Pothos, and so we're doing that specific route. It's just that like we're trying to spend some time trying to come up with what the best possible setup would be, and this is what we ended up sort of landing on. Later on, people are going to ask for other sort of GraphQL servers or other sort of setups around GraphQL, and we'll go out and sort of support that. We just wanted to start with something that out of the box gives you a good experience, which tying into, I think, the bigger point being that I think we could be a bit more opinionated on helping people get started, and giving a setup that also sort of scales. I think we'd noticed a little bit from talking to some folks in the community that had sort of larger projects that they were maybe not set up in sort of the best way, and they were running into some issues over time. Issues that could have been avoided if we had some recommendations or guidelines on how to structure things. And we get questions like this all the time in Slack. It just makes sense to have that as a starter that people can use and get started with the day one. I think that about covers sort of where we are now. Maybe dive into the questions and stuff. And everybody, if you've got questions, feel free to sort of post them. We'll take them on as they come on. Frank, you're muted.
It's back to the schema and builder file. Why does the type need to access the builder? It's probably a dumb question, but I just want to get it out.
This thing? Why do we need this?
I guess why the types need to import the builder.
Why?
You're talking about the cyclical dependency where.
Oh, okay, yeah. So this builder is kind of like the global object, and so everything, like all these types, like call functions on the builder, and the builder like collects every single call, and that's how it like builds up the entire schema. And then at the end, that's when we can call builder.toSchema. Does that answer your question?
I see. Right. Got it. Yeah, if you stay on this file, I was looking at some other syntax. Could we do like an import /type/star dot, curly bracket JS, TS?
I guess.
So, let me see.
So I think I need to look. Sorry, go ahead.
So I was just posting it in the chat, something like that.
Yeah. So the challenge here is I think this is one of the things that is a little tricky. So according to the spec, it doesn't allow stuff like this, like the import, like the module spec, because this would never work in a browser, right? If you do this in a browser, like it has no way to go and enumerate all the files on a server. So that's why like this type of thing is not in like the ESM spec. But I have seen specific bundlers, because I think I know Vite has some kind of like file globbing thing where it'll kind of like let you do that. I have to see if ESBuild has something like that, because then this file could just not even exist in. This file doesn't have to really exist in this code base, because you're right, it is just boilerplate. If we can just automatically load everything in the types folder, it might be a better.
What's your thought on doing something like this? If you do something like this, then we are pretty much saying that you have to follow this folder structure. You cannot rename like types to type, or or GraphQL to like GQL folder name, right? What's your thoughts on?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about that even for in the stacks code. Like, I was thinking we should actually just default these so you don't have to specify them. Because if you're starting off from our starter, we do have an opinionated file structure. It still lets you change it, but I feel like we can assume that you're following that file structure unless you have it specified. Maybe we can do something similar here. But to answer your question, I think in general, I do like the idea of having a like file structure that we like doing stuff based off of the file structure. Like we've seen other projects do this, like Next.js, and it's a pattern I've seen before. And I think the benefits are, one, we can do more with less configuration, and two, everyone's projects kind of look the same.
Less support.
Yeah. And also just easy onboarding for people that are getting onto a new project. Like everything is where they expect it. So if we are going to go that route, we should think really hard about what the file structure should be, so we don't. It's always going to be worse than what people would want personally, but it should still generally be good for most people. Right. But yeah, I have to see.
Have you played around with Next.js or Redwood? Because Redwood, they do like a huge amount of like scaffolding and stuff, right? So everything is kind of expected where you keep the route on the front end, route being at that spot, and then it's named like route.tsx. It kind of like have all these assumptions where you have cells, you have like layouts. Yeah. I'm assuming over there you cannot really like change the folder names, like.
Yeah, like compared to where we are and where they are, like it's a pretty big gap. So I think we can go more in that direction.
Jay, do you have any preference, like any thoughts on this? Like going in the direction of, have more opinionated or like fixed folder structure, and you can't really like rename stuff.
Yeah, well, personally, I don't like it, because I am pretty picky on
That's why
naming, I
I
guess.
asked the question.
Yeah, I guess it's never. Maybe I'll need to see a setup where I'm like, wow, this is so easy, or like, okay, so sorry, no, these setups are easy. I think the problem for me is the moment I feel like I have to do something custom, all of a sudden it goes from like looking really clean to being a lot uglier than it would if it natively allowed me to configure it. I don't know if that sort of makes sense. It's like,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's sort of my issue. I almost prefer. Actually, sorry. Let me back up a little bit. There's something interesting in like Dax's framing from before. He was saying this is like easy to get started, but 2 or 3 years down the road, it effectively looks the same. And I kind of like that, or like that framing of it. And in response to this one, 2 or 3 years down the road, you're probably breaking out of the file structure based approach, and it doesn't look the same. So anyway, that's
it's a good point. Like I've really, I guess to say, if you had to ask me right now, do I feel like I know enough to be really opinionated about how the types folder, or even if it should be called types, it probably should be called something else. How that should be, I don't think I'm that confident, because there's all kinds of situations where people might have a public and a private API, like an internal one and one that they, let their customers use. There might be like different subgraphs, but like they might have a separate auth subgraph just to do auth across several products. So things like that, I'm less clear on exactly what the best way to do is. So maybe the explicit approach is fine for now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would say like maybe as we get more closer to launching this, I think then we can sort of think. I don't know. Yeah, I could be swayed. Is I guess my sort of thing with this.
Yeah, so far I just followed like the Pothos documentation on like how they recommend structuring stuff. I haven't really deviated too much from that or hit any of that.
Got it. Cool. Yeah. All right. Let's move on. Oh yeah, just personally, I prefer the structured way. I always prefer doing less, but just tell me what I need to do, how do I need to structure my stuff, and then I want to do less. But yeah, but I see is your point. I think there's a could be a fine line. I guess it's a gray area, but I think that you could draw a line on the things that are very unlikely going to change. Like probably, I think the moment you draw a line, I think some people would not be happy, like advanced usage. But I think you could draw a line at a point where you might piss off or 10% of people, or like 5% of people. I think hiding types and builder might be within that line, whereas enforcing a folder structure on the front end, kind of like Next.js, that you might be like, I think a lot more people will kind of run up against that constraint, right? And yeah, let's move on. So in the web package, we have like the urco.ts. Is that something that can go into our package?
Yeah, so this is something I need to think about as well. So the challenge here is everything here is boilerplate except for this, because this is coming from your code gen.
Yep.
I need to think about how to do this in a way where you're importing these use type queries from our package. So the code isn't literally here, but it's picking these types up. I think there is a way to do this. I'm just not remembering right now. That's kind of like how Prisma works. Like Prisma,
right? You kind of code gen into like node modules, right?
That's one approach. I just have to see. Yeah, I just need to play with it, but that is something that we should try to improve.
Cool. Good. I think I'm asking relevant questions, so it's not give me some confidence. Yeah, can we auto gen the migration? I think we briefly mentioned before we hopped on here, right? Is that
the migration
for the adding a new table and stuff? I think what I'm coming from is like whenever when I was playing around with it, whenever I feel like I'm defining something twice, I feel like is that something we could use?
So this is I felt the same pain. Even when I did my talk, it was like kind of annoying that I needed to go write a migration and I needed to update the types. So I think there's a few different ways to think about this. There is obviously the best way is you have a single place where you define your schema and everything is generated from there, including migration. So that's what Prisma does. Like it's a single schema file for your whole thing. It'll generate migrations and apply them for you. It'll also generate the typings for using in TypeScript. So that's a really good experience. The other approach you can take is I'm going to write my migrations manually, but I'm going to generate my types from the database. So that's still kind of like a single source of truth. Like it's all coming from the database. And there's what we have now where there is not a single source of truth. You write your migrations and you write the type separately. So I think Seth linked a project to me this past week. I need to look more into it. That lets us do the middle option so that whenever we run a migration, we could regenerate types for Kaiserly. And I think that might make it a little bit smoother because it's all you just focus on the migrations, and then once they're run, like you have everything to write your application code. The other thing is, so for my own stuff, I'm not using RDS. I'm using DynamoDB and ElectroDB. That's a really great experience because there's just a single place where you define everything, and everything just works instantly. No code gen, nothing. So I do think the Dynamo experience has less like duplicate steps. Yeah. So anyway, takeaway is I want to explore that thing Seth linked. But this is one of the advantages that Prisma has because they figured out the declarative to imperative thing for migrations. I talked to the Kaiserly creator if that was ever an area he'd explore. Obviously, it's huge. It's like a huge task. So understandably, he said it's probably makes more sense in external tools. Yeah.
Hey Dax, I think I just sent you something. I think Misha was saying something. The way he's doing the schema generation. Can I take a look, see if that makes sense?
Yeah, let me take a quick look.
Just showing.
So in general, when I think I have to look at this deeper to understand exactly what's going on.
Yeah,
but
just post that in the chat so other people have some context. Yeah. I think the format is messed up. Yeah.
Yeah, like, so I am in general, like, I understand that there's people that want to just define their schema in something like Prisma from a database and then get a full GraphQL API automatically. And there's like valid use cases for that. And there's a lot of validation for that too, because there's a bunch of services that do that, right? Like Supabase does that, Hasura does that. There's like the other one that I linked to you guys, GraphBase, I think it's called, does something like that too. That I think that to me is doesn't really work for the type of use case that we're building for. If you need your if you want your API to be one-to-one with your database, like that's a great solution. but we specifically don't want to do full generation end to end. Oh, okay. He's saying he's defining it separately. Yeah. So I need to look more into what he's doing, but yeah, like Pothos has a Prisma plugin as well. So if people are using that, there's a nice way to combine everything. I generally want to keep those very separated in our setup. So I really just want the GraphQL types talking to the core functions. I don't really want them coupled that much to the database, at least in the starter. If that's something that you want to do, there's no reason you can't do that. But yeah, I think like I said, Prisma solves a lot of these database and typing problems. It's just I right now can't recommend it as part of our starter because of just like it just increases your bundle size to a really large amount. And my testing, again, I haven't done this again in a while, but it really slowed down cold starts a lot. So it's just not what I don't know. I just feel like it's not what I would recommend.
Yeah, and again, this might change, but I think the takeaway that we had from looking at some of these was that they're not optimizing for running inside Lambda, and optimizing might be a strong word. I think it's like that's not a major concern for them. And again, this thing might change. Like people might start to optimize for it, and we might have to reevaluate this. So it's not a set in stone thing, but currently that's where it sort of stands at.
Yeah, and there is a way to get it running well but you have to use their service. They have this Prisma data proxy. I forgot what it's called, something like that. Prisma data. I don't think it's called data proxy, but it's called something like that. That works really well if you use that service, because then your Lambdas don't really have anything heavy in them. They just talk to the third-party service, kind of like the data API. So you can get it all working. But like, we don't want our setup to require a service that's at AWS. Mm-hmm. There's some other tools though. There's other tools that do declarative schema definition, and I think that is like the way forward. I think they work well in like 98% of cases, which is good for most people. So it's probably something we should explore. So instead of manually writing migrations, maybe there is a tool we integrate with that lets you specify it in one place, and we can generate migrations for you and types for you. But we can still use Kaisley to query it, which kind of avoids all the cold start issues.
So in that case, Dax, could you open up core and articles? Yeah. In that case, like the case you just described, it doesn't. If you just write the schema files, but you still have to write the database schema yourself, right, manually.
No, I'm saying if there are some tools that let you define a schema just like in Prisma, generate migrations, and if we integrate with a tool like that, we can also generate like this whole thing for you. So this will just go away, this whole like declare module thing, and then you can just like write the queries and it'll be available immediately.
Oh, when you say the schema, you mean the database schema, right?
Yeah, just like if you look at the Prisma definition file, it'll look something like that, where you say like, here are my objects, and here are their fields, and here are the types. And given a existing database, it can do a diff and figure out what it needs to do.
Right. Cool.
Yeah. There's also some like different workflows that exist, like PlanetScale, because of their branching model. You don't really need to bother with migrations at all. So yeah, I don't know, it's definitely a rough area. We can probably look more into it.
Right. Yeah, another area I was looking at is kind of reminds me of like Rails, where you have all these like CRUD UI when the moment you have a database. Right, like Rails like they scaffold that for you. I think Redwood is doing that as well. I wonder if that something we could explore that we can put inside our SSD console, where if you imagine go to the RDS, or we could even do this for Dynamo too, right? If you do the single table thing, where we gave you X Dynamo will be harder because you don't know all the column types, right? But for RDS, we could kind of like, since we know your schema, do we?
Yeah, so
We could
Prisma
technically
has
find
this too.
out.
They have like their studio, and it's just like, yeah, it gives you like a tab for every type, and you can. It's basically like taking Airtable and embedding it in our product, where you can just kind of edit everything.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yeah, I think that would be useful.
Yeah, I always felt that's kind of weird. That goes into, you scaffold that into your application. It seems it's kind of, you should scaffold that into like some sort of admin console, and SSD console might be a good place for that.
Yeah, I agree. To me, it's just like an external tool that has nothing to do with your code base. It's like a better, it's just like a smarter database query tool. Like we have our RDS Explorer now, but you have to write just straight SQL to do stuff. Like you should be able to like interact with those tables in a like a friendlier way.
Right. Right. I guess currently the way we are structuring the I guess the backend GraphQL stacks and the web. The web, how easy is it to swap it out and then use like Next.js, let's say? I feel like we're not like, we made the decision to not invest much in the on the front end, apart from talking to our database, talking to S3, and talking to API. But besides that, we're not really like investing much. And I think if people want to use something like Next.js, or I think Redwood, again, like they did a pretty good job of simplifying some of the layout stuff, right? How easy it is to swap out web and use like other like React frameworks.
Yeah, I think other React frameworks pretty easy, because that the only thing you really need is that url.ts file. You can use that anywhere that url works. So yeah, I think if you bootstrap this with the Next.js thing, you should just be able to use that as is. I don't think there's anything that's specific.
Yeah, I think we'll have, I don't know what we're going to call these, but like we're going to have, I guess, different flavors of this. Yeah, variants. Yeah.
Yeah, I think ultimately the architecture that this provides is you're going to do a GraphQL API. Most people that are doing that are probably just building SPAs. So that's why I think we're bootstrapping a React application on the front. I think a lot of people that use Next just use Next for full stack. Like there's no reason that you need a separate API with Next. And I think the most advanced users are using Next, but instead of Next directly talking to your database, it's talking to a GraphQL API. And so I think that's like the most advanced setup. I think we have value in the first one and the last one. Like we obviously don't have much value if you're just using Next full stack.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I when we write out the documentation for this, I think we should tell people that if we had a variant, right, like a Next.js variant, I think we should like specifically tell them, hey, it is not good for this specific use case. And I'm sure some people will figure it out, but it is worth sort of pointing out like what we're not doing.
Yeah, and I think even for us strategically, it's just an area to keep an eye on. Like Redwood is also committing to our architecture, really SPA focused. But if people like these SSR frameworks where they don't really see the need to create an API anymore, because you can write code that runs on the server and on the front end in the same file. Yeah, that's interesting because that kind of makes all of our stuff not as useful for people that are following that pattern. I don't know how big it's going to get. I still think that the SPA approach makes sense for a lot of like applications. But yeah, we'll see. Like that space is evolving, and I think people are looking more in that direction.
Yeah, especially I think like multi-client applications.
Yeah, exactly.
Or even things with like eventually if you're building your own sort of like back office tooling.
Oh yeah, exactly. Like if as soon as you have like administrative workflows, like you'll want to have a centralized API. So I think that goes again back to I guess like the audience we're focusing on. It's less for just like a fast getting started thing that for a basic website more okay, you're building a startup, probably a tech startup, probably a SaaS company. And we generally have seen the way those evolve and the different needs that come up, and we're kind of building for specifically that, which I think is some kind of similar to how Redwood talks about their goals as well.
Yeah, they do. I think again, this I think speaks to our experience, our personal experiences in this field as well, right? Is that like you want to be using something that allows you to like move really quickly, and so you shouldn't feel like at some point you're like, hey, I can't quite implement this thing because of how we've been structured to date. So yeah. But anyway.
Yeah. Anyhow, just to kind of like share like what I felt when I was working on adding a new feature. I felt like last time I tried GraphQL,
actually,
was
Frank, really quickly, can you walk through what you did? I might have missed this, but also it might be helpful for other people too. Like, what did you try to do, and then talk about what you felt?
I was going to do that because last time I tried GraphQL, I feel there are it was a bit overwhelming as someone who's new to GraphQL, and you have to update the schema, you have to code gen stuff, you have to write up queries in a string format on the front end. I kind of what I miss is like if you need to add a feature in the REST API, like a standard REST backend, right? You would write a schema to update, write like a migration to update database, change the database, write a model. If you look at the MVC model, where you create a model file that talks to database, you create a controller to add a new API endpoint, and then you add your business logic in the view, right? In the core part, and on the front end, you go implement the front end. So there are these kind of 5 steps, like 4 steps. You to do 3 steps on the back end, update the database, like run the migration, add a new model, add a new API. So those 3 steps, it's up to you if you want a lot more business logic. So if you want to do like minimal, just like you touch three places on the back end, and then you implement the feature on the front end. So yesterday when I was trying to add like a profile feature, it pretty much came down to this exact 4 step. It was one extra step, like 5 steps. So it was very similar to the experience I had when I was working on REST API. Right, so migration, and you write like a database, a model file, which is very similar. DAX have that inside the core article. So pretty much I created like a core profile or core user. So at a user table, I created a core/user, and then I created kind of add a new API, which is I added in the I think it was inside. Let's see where they added it.
Frank, do you want to share your screen maybe?
Yeah.
Would that be helpful? Because I kind of want to see what you did.
Yeah. Can you see it? Can you see it?
Yeah, I can. Sorry, I was muted.
Yeah. Sorry. So pretty much what I did was, so if you've seen like the DAX demo before, which was like a notes, I just want to add like a profile page. So to add that, I need to add like a users table, right? But what the users table look like so I don't quite know on top of my head. That's why I didn't go straight to writing the schema. Writing the migration. So I kind of created the type first. So instead types, I had like create a user type, which pretty much just forces me to write out, what fields are there. Okay, it has ID, it has a name, um, and how you would, fetch a user and how you update a user's profile. Uh, so this is almost like in the typical like a model file, you would define what the model types are, and then add two queries to it, right? So I created this first, and then I went into the migrations. So I created like a third migration, which again you can see I'm really finding out the columns, which I kind of did there already. That's why I kind of brought up the question of, can we auto gen this migration? So this is the second file I touched. After this, I went and defined the types. It's kind of called types, but to me it's really kind of like new APIs you're adding, right? So I'm adding like a new query API and like a new mutation API, which for query is that you provide like user ID, and then you go fetch that user, you query that user, and it returns you this user object, which just have the ID and name in there. And I created this like update API, which again takes a user ID and a name, and you would call database, and it would return
Wait, is Frank frozen or am I frozen? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, now I can hear you. I couldn't hear. Dax, are you
sorry.
muted?
Oh yeah, I was muted.
Okay, I was like, what happened to the stream?
I was saying I thought Frank was getting abducted because his face turned all purple.
Yeah, it confused me because I was like, okay, I can't hear anybody, and Frank is frozen. Wait, Frank is still frozen. Frank,
Yeah.
move. No, Frank is frozen. Frank is running at 2 FPS.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
But it's just like stop frame
I'm
animation.
back.
Yeah.
No. Well,
this is when Frank says I need an M1.
Oh man.
It's like, we're going to take a short commercial break to talk about the Apple M1.
All right, you guys hear me now?
Yeah, what happened there? Maybe something's just killing your computer.
You can hear me now, right? Just confirm.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. So this is the third file I updated. This reminds me of like the controller stuff I was adding, right? Adding a new API to the backend. So after this, there is one little thing I need to add to be able to pick up the schema and do the autogen stuff.
I think you actually showed the same file twice.
So
you didn't show us core user yet.
Oh, core. I think that's.
This is where you started.
Yeah, this is where I started, right? So I kind of defined.
Yeah, I think you showed us the
GraphQL
one first.
Yeah.
So I added this file first, right? This is almost like a model file, right?
Okay. This makes sense.
Yeah. So what the table looks like, and yeah, I think I did show the wrong file. Yeah, and I have two actions on DB and pretty much like a CRUD up action.
Nice.
This is the part.
So just to clarify, because I haven't like totally followed this. So you did the Kaiserly stuff first.
Yes, I did the Kaiserly stuff first so that I know what are all the actions I need to do on a user object.
On the database, right?
On the database, yeah.
Right.
And
on the users table, let's say, whatever.
Yeah. What I need to do on the users table, I need to do fetch a single
then
user.
You went and created the user table.
And that went to the migrations and
Right.
created the user table.
Right. Okay.
Right. I guess, yeah, Dax, sorry.
No, I was going to say that this is it's good that you talked about it in this way, because I think what's interesting about this setup is sometimes you'll enter from different places. So I think in this case, it felt natural for you to enter, okay, let me figure out the data model first and saving stuff to the database. And the API is like not a big deal. It's just going to expose some of that.
Right.
I think what I've found is, depending on what I'm working on, I'll enter from a different place. Sometimes I'm like, this is a really tricky API. Like, I don't know how I want to expose this. So I'll start in the GraphQL stuff. And I'll get all that right. Then I'll bother going and implementing the database, make the database easy. But sometimes I have like a very tricky data model to figure out, and I'll start from the database side first.
Right.
So yeah, I think like the order of this will switch depending on what feature you work on, but you still need to do all the steps.
Yeah. I feel these two steps are super familiar to me, because right, it's the same. You do the same thing for in the REST setup. Yeah, and then,
I want to show you guys the after we go through this, I want to show you what it looks like with Dynamo, because I think it's actually half the steps in some ways.
Right. That's true. Yeah.
Anyway, let's go through this. Yeah. Okay. So
so I need to add this here.
Right. And again, to add context, so this is basically adding it to. So this is what allows us to generate the GraphQL schema object, and you have to add it here so that. Okay.
Yeah. So this is what Frank was talking about earlier. Right now, this is an explicit list that you need to add to every time you add a new concept. It's not for every new feature, because if you're just adding another feature now to article user, you don't have to update this. But every new concept you add, you probably need to go here. So I think that's why he was suggesting maybe it makes sense to auto load everything in the folder.
Okay. Wow. Yeah. This is useful, Frank. I think just for the stream purposes, we should have done this before you asked the questions.
Right.
At least it helps me, and I'm sure it like helps other viewers. But now coming back to your original question, I actually like it being explicit in this case. Yeah.
But I think that's why I kind of.
It's fine if it like auto picks it up too. I guess your question before, now that I recall, was like, why not star or something, right? And it was like, and then we were talking about the ESM stuff.
I think I was, like Dax was saying, if you make it star, this whole file can be gone. We can move this whole thing. We could potentially move this whole thing inside our.
Yeah, and then to respond to that other question of like, do we want to do the file-based, like essentially this setup? I would prefer to support a star option as opposed to automatically doing it. That's just me. But
yeah, like it's still explicit, but you can just say load everything.
Yeah.
The other thing that I was thinking about was so one of the things.
Okay, now I understand what's going on.
One of the things that I want to encourage, and I think we talked about this, where yes, we're providing a bunch of code, but we want to also
don't look at it, Frank. Oh.
We want to also think about it as well, how does this fit into like your company's workflow? Like, how does it integrate with the product team? How does it integrate with whatever? I think one thing to consider is, one of the things I've been liking is trunk-based development. So you merge things very quickly, but you feature flag everything. But if you auto load everything in a folder, it's kind of hard to push out something that's not ready for production yet. Or, like, you want it to be turned off, but you still want the code merged in. it's hard to do that when you load a whole file or all the files automatically. I think there probably still is a way to flag it, but
right.
yeah, I think
Frank,
when you really explicitness, you lose that.
Yeah. No, this one I think should resonate with Frank, because Frank loves doing it this way. Frank loves pushing stuff out sort of part by part. Yeah, what do you think, Frank? That makes sense, right?
I think that makes sense, but if you look at like when I try out some of these like more advanced like frameworks, which I get kind of a bit overwhelmed on the number of amount of files in their thing and in the starter. I that's why I kind of want to lay out the 3 goals where we try to get to with this framework. I think having the least number of files, like it's the least important out of those 3 priorities. But if without compromising on, I guess, flexibility and helping people understand why we're laying out stuff in this way, it's kind of preferable where these 2 files, I really don't quite know what they are. The builder, I mean, now I know, but as someone new, I really don't know what they are for. Builder.ts and schema.ts. And for me to use this, technically, I don't even have to know what path this is. It is magically everything is fully typed.
Interesting.
Right. Again, I just feel like this 2 feels a bit more boilerplate. And as a side note, where I also SQL.ts also feels a little bit
there's also something we can consider moving into a package, because this specific pattern, well, this is if we commit to this pattern of like defining, if we don't find a solution for automatically generating the types, then this is useful because everyone should have this in their code base, so might as well move that into a library file and they just extend it with their own types.
Frank, sorry, could you quickly touch on, this is just me again getting caught up here, but quickly touch on the builder and the schema again, and then we'll come back to the SQL.ts. I forgot what the SQL.ts is, but before that, maybe the builder and schema.
Oh yeah, so if you remember, I added a migration, right? I added a model called like a user, and so next thing I have to do is almost add like sort of API, pretty much just add a new query and new mutation.
This is the actual GraphQL bit. Yeah.
And if it feels like I'm really finding the same columns, but it's really like you don't necessarily want to expose all the columns in the table, right?
Right. And, this is we're not one-to-one API to DB.
You might want to transform it. You want to load, like all the articles of this user, right? So you could put stuff in there. When you query a user, give it like a user ID, and we want to update it. You provide user ID and all the other attributes. Right now, it's just name. This feels a bit verbose, the syntax. I guess it's part of the Zod, but I feel like I wrote quite a bit of stuff just to to get it and setter. But it wasn't super obvious to me like how you could simplify this. But right at first, I'm like, why I'm defining this type? I'm not really defining this type. It's really like you could define inline here, but it's doing that twice, so you just lift that out to the top. Yeah, I guess this is just falls under something where there's no way I can write this like from scratch. It's probably like copy and paste.
Sorry, you said this is Zod. This isn't Zod, right? Or is it?
No, it's Pathos. Yeah.
Pathos, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No, that also is not Zod yet. If you turn on the Zod, there's a validation plugin that lets you add more rules to those args. and that will use odd.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, the reason it's just one of those things where after you write this a few times, it starts to feel more natural. And it's just like about learning Pothos. I think to some degree, people are going to have to visit. I mean, we'll do our best to like explain all the Pothos concepts, but you're probably going to have to like go to their docs if you want to really, really understand it and the capabilities.
Right. Like the version I was like, before the version I would feel natural about would be something like this, where, and then I really need an M1. Oh my god, return. Something like this. I just this is just like pseudocode, but I felt it. Why it wasn't as simple as something like this? Why was like this block?
Yeah, I think this just comes down to when you design APIs that are TypeScript first, they look a little bit weirder because they need to be a little weird to support the type safety. I think what you just put there, you could build something like that if you had the type information available at runtime. But you obviously don't with TypeScript, so you end up with these like slightly weirder APIs.
No, wait, Dax. Wait. Maybe you can speak to this. Okay, so Balthus is taking it's taking effectively like a spec, right? And then transforming that into the GraphQL schema, right? Why can't it take normal looking code like what Frank just wrote there and then transform it into the schema? Like this would be like some sort of like, again, I'm not saying like Potter should do this, but like I could see some sort of setup there, or is that like too hard?
Yeah, so I mean,
to do?
with Frank's example, you actually don't have enough there. So, for example, the arguments, how do you mark that? There's certain properties that you can mark with the arguments that you can't express in TypeScript. Those arguments could also be they're called GraphQL inputs, which are other you can kind of like build your own type, like more complex object as an input. It just becomes hard to express. Like the way that he has it is actually, I think the approach with Pothos is it actually is normal code in terms of defining the GraphQL schema. Like you can define arguments that have these properties, etc. And all Pothos is good about doing is inferring from there to give you type safety. So in the resolve function, you don't have to put a type on the args because it knows that, okay, it has a user ID field.
And you can't quite do that inferring thing if the entire thing was written as a function like Frank has it.
Well, you would still need to, like, the issue is you need to know this information at runtime. So at runtime, if it analyzes this function, it's going to be like, okay, user ID. It has no idea what user ID is because all like the string, the fact that it's a string there goes away. This is kind of what that thing I linked the other day, that deep kit thing. It's kind of what that project is trying to solve, where you can kind of write code like what Frank wants. But then that information is available at runtime, so then it can actually do all the work it needs to. But I think with like kind of native TypeScript, this what you have here is like the best way to do it.
Maybe we need to look into what they're doing. I'm not saying that that's what we need to do right now for the ideal stack, but like, but yeah, there is something to this, and like the progression I'm sort of seeing is like you're basically moving to a point where you're effectively writing, like normal code. And then
Yeah,
like you basically just infer.
Yeah, there's just some challenges here too. Like even this function that Frank has isn't valid because he's saying that the GraphQL query returns a user type. That's not what this function returns. It returns a SQL row. So that's why there's that red underline under user type. So yeah, I think the general idea is with TypeScript today, we have like what Pothos looks like. If you have runtime stuff available, it can probably look like 50% better, probably. But it's not going to be like as simple as like that pseudocode.
Right. And so I guess kind of the question here is, and maybe this one is for you, Frank, is writing it in the Pothos spec way better than writing like GraphQL, right? Like there.
It's definitely better because of the type thing, right?
Well, aside from that, when you're saying type thing, it's because like we're getting the inferred types out of it. But in just actual writing it, what do you feel? Pretty much this whole conversation started with you saying it's a bit weird, it's a bit verbose, which is true, right? Do you feel? I guess my stance here is like this is a bit worse than writing. Yeah, exactly. Like just writing like GraphQL.
The thing to remember though is when you write GraphQL, you're only writing half of this. You're not writing on the resolve. My experience is once you have all the editor plugin stuff set up for GraphQL, I think it's probably easier than writing this. Just like ignoring the fact that I'm practiced at writing this now. I think it's probably still easier just writing straight GraphQL. There are a few little things that I can do here because you have JavaScript that you can't do in GraphQL. There was a situation I had where very specific. Maybe I don't need to go into the details, but there's some when you run into that like more complex type situations where you want to like always share some fields, like for example, timestamp fields. Like you want to make sure every entity has like a created at, deleted at, modified at thing. It's harder to code reuse in straight GraphQL, whereas there's actually a whole page in Pothos dedicated to showing how you can like, okay, here's how you reuse, certain bits of the schema.
Yeah. What do you think, Frank? Misha, by the way, says that we should just use Prisma.
Yeah, I think the flow that Misha's talking about is what we had before, where you go from GraphQL to TypeGen on the back end.
Yeah, maybe talk about, I guess, like what are the things we sort of ran into, and it'll maybe add context to why we're looking at this.
I think the upside there is you're defining SDL, which is like the GraphQL language, and that's like what you're defining, and everything understands that. The GraphQL code understands that. All the server stuff understands that. It's like very standard. But the challenge is you need to code gen into the back end. So when you're kind of doing your day-to-day work where you're writing, like you're adding new stuff to your schema and you're code genning the interfaces for resolvers, it is kind of clunky. Like things don't pick up right away. It's just not as seamless. It is nice to do code first where you're defining both your schema and your implementation together. And Pothos isn't the first one to do this. Like Nexus is a big one that they were kind of the first ones to do this, or maybe not first, but one of the bigger ones. So it's there's just arguments at both sides. Like, do you do schema first or code first? I think with our goals being provide a really great TypeScript experience, it makes more sense to do code first, define everything in TypeScript, not leaving that mental model. But like I said, it's some people do prefer the code first and code genning everything from there.
Yeah, I think to Misha's point, this is one of those things that I guess a broader point for us here is that we're not going to be sort of opinionated on like, hey, this is the only way you can use SST per se, right? We're going to have like starters for Prism. We're going to explore more into like, what is the possible Prisma setup you can have on serverless. That's something that we're going to continue to do. Currently, one of the reasons I think we're going down this route or exploring down this route is because of this end-to-end type safety bit, where it is just more natural to just purely write TS all the way through. But yeah, that's kind of where we stand. Again, this is still early days, but hopefully that helps. Misha saying, I'm not talking about SDL or schema at all. Maybe we need to get on a call with Misha at some point.
Yeah, I might not be following what he's saying. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm familiar with the setup he's talking about. I think our previous setup did look like that.
Yep.
Like we are doing code gen still. We are generating stuff from the schema. This is different than I think a lot of people use the GraphQL code gen tool, which is what we were using before as well. And that really goes off of defining stuff in your schema and generating from there. This approach is definitely less, this is newer, I think, and maybe people are a little less familiar with this, but ultimately you end up getting all the same stuff. It's just different in terms of where the source of truth is.
Yeah, and to Misha's comment about us doing a stream together, one of the things that we could do is, and this is just one of the things I feel like almost everybody in our community has done. We're all made up of people that are kind of early adopters, and we're trying to like figure out what our perfect setup sort of looks like. I know from just sort of reading some of Misha's comments and issues before that like he's worked through getting his setup working. And so maybe if we were to do sort of a stream with him, it would basically be him demoing his setup and us basically just like asking questions or like fielding questions from the community about the setup, which I think is a good idea. There are like people that have, and this is not just GraphQL specific, people have done sort of like their ideal setups for things like, like Zach with the step functions thing. It might be worth sort of like diving into that at some point, things like that. So this makes sense to me.
Just to answer, so our previous setup did like we were also code-genning off of operations, which is the stuff you define in the front end. The reason we don't have that anymore is because it's not needed anymore. And Misha might not have seen the demo from before. Like we don't need code-gen on the front end for each operation anymore. We just have these typed query hooks, and you can query whatever you want. So there's no like code gen step. Like if I go modify this, I don't need to go code gen again. So that's how it works on our front end. We don't have any operation files. We don't have any documents. We don't have any queries. We don't have any mutations in our front ends at all.
Yeah, maybe Frank. I don't know if you did this in your. I
realized I talked as though my screen was shared, but it wasn't. So.
Frank, I don't know if you have done the front end part of it, but maybe you can continue all the way through. Right? Have you done the front end part of it too?
Yeah.
Okay, then maybe let's just like let's show the whole thing. But anyway, quickly, really, did you have any thoughts on my original question of when you were saying this felt verbose, right? Like, I guess what were you comparing it to? Like, what did you feel? What was sort of the downside of writing this, I guess?
I guess I wasn't thinking about what's required to get the type safety, for type safety and the runtime checks to make sure fields are required and stuff. I was looking at this to see what it's trying to do, and I feel it's it's pretty much just specifying what the function is doing, what the function is taking, and what the function is returning. So why is that like a normal function?
Yeah. The other thing to also consider is like the plugin system. So that all plugs in here as well. So you can define other stuff like this gets augmented, right? So you might have authorization, like what permissions do people need to call this mutation, things like that.
Right. Hey Dax, this might not be related, but does any sort of these like directives they help in this case?
Decorators?
Decorators, yeah.
Yeah, I personally hate decorators.
I do wonder what's going to happen, because there's like Dax isn't the only one. There's a lot of anti-decorator.
I think I would like it more if it was more natively supported, but I guess that's more of an ES build problem, because you need to like use a plugin to support the decorator stuff. Yeah. But yeah, like the other approach is you would have a function with a bunch of decorators on it to extend it, which I think is how a lot of other frameworks do it. I just think I also don't think there's a way to use decorator. So a nice thing about this is you can technically, it's maybe a little hard to explain, but you can have a plugin that augments the types that you get into your resolve function. So if you add this certain plugin and define it, you get like different types that show up as arguments to your resolve function. That would not be possible with a decorator approach. So I think this is actually a really great example of this is what a library looks like when it's built TypeScript first. It looks definitely a little bit weird and not what you'd expect. It's not the API you would come up with if you were just thinking about how do I make this simple. But it is the one that is like extensible and the most type safe. So yeah, they're always going to look a little weird because of how TypeScript works.
Yeah, you brought this up a couple of times. I wanted to, I don't know, maybe ask you this, is that like, do you think this is an intermediate step in TypeScript's evolution?
Well,
or is it just like a necessary part of?
Yeah, with their stated goals of what constraints that they have and what they want to always support, I think this is how it's going to look for a very long time. Like I said, that DeepKit project is the first one I've seen that is trying to do more than what TypeScript stated goals are. So I think it's just to keep an eye on, like if that starts to grow and become more of a legit thing and maybe puts pressure on TypeScript core to pivot from what their stated goals are, then it could look different. But yeah, again, I don't know how long any of these things last. But yeah, I think this, based on TypeScript's current stated goals, like this is what we're going to see. And these types of libraries, there's not a lot of them, but we're starting to see more and more of them.
So, hey Dax, let's say on the front end, that if I make this false, does it affect the front end right away in front end like use mutation, use type mutation?
Yeah, that you should get. That should be good. You should see a question mark there for it being optional.
Okay, all right. I'll continue to show what I did on the front end.
Yep.
It's I just added a route here, authenticated route / profile page, and then it's really simple. Just create a profile page, which I import incognito because I need to know the current user ID. I imported the use mutation, use query because I need to do a query first. I'll step by step. I'm doing the use incognito. I don't know if there's a better way to fetch the user ID from here, but this is what I'm essentially doing. Getting the X token payload from there. And this is a use type query. If you look at the Right, if you look at this, it's yeah, it's kind of very similar where what I'm defining here. It takes a user ID, it returns a user type. So pretty much it takes a user ID, which I need to pass in, and it returns a user type. I'm only getting ID and name from it. If I save it, I just see if what Dax said makes sense, or also need user ID 2. And that's
Do you have
the
the
profile.
CLI running?
No, I don't.
I think it's gonna crash.
Can you handle doing one more thing?
I need to turn off a bunch of things.
I'm sure Slack takes up like half your capacity.
Yeah, somebody was joking about like how now the M1 is slow again. Did you read that?
Why?
Everybody's just writing shittier and shittier code to take up the performance benefits.
Yeah,
of the
I mean
M1.
that's how it works. It's not for the end user; it's for the companies.
Oh, okay. What? Oh. Oops.
Also, part of it is VS Code. Frank, did you get Vim set up?
In
with all the
where?
types and stuff?
In VS Code?
No, Vim. No,
I'm-
not inside Vim, but just Vim with all
That
the
needs to be its
types.
own stream.
Because I'm pretty sure, like VS Code is part of the problem here.
There's like layers of problems. There's the underlying MacBook. There's Slack running in the background. There's VS Code.
I think I'm screwed.
No.
I was updating the doc for the app, and I removed it, and it wiped out my credentials, I think. Because it backs up your AWS credentials.
Oh, Leap?
Oh my god, is it called Leap? Yes, a double P in the end, right?
Yeah.
Frank is a little French today.
I didn't hear what he said.
I don't know. No, I just heard app. Yeah.
I thought it was called the app.
He just got it. He just got it.
What?
La app.
Oh damn! I think it's because it's a French team. It's a team based in Paris that reached out and be like, okay, can you add the?
It might be. I actually don't know.
Yeah.
It might be.
Yeah, can you add the
Can we
doc
ping
for
them?
how to use Leap?
There's no way.
It could be like.
I'll be mind blown if it is.
I mean, it could be like a clever play on words type of thing.
Like when I learned that it was pronounced Nginx and not Nginx, which is what I thought for years.
Wait, how do we kick somebody off a stream?
We're trying to kick Frank?
No, I'm trying to kick you out of the stream. What?
I mean,
Did you say Nginx?
I'm slow today. Yeah. I mean, I only ever read it and I was like, Nginx. Did you guys know it was Nginx right away?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
I'm trying to remember. Was it because? No, it's not because of the logo. The logo doesn't have anything. I mean, first off, like they didn't have a logo for the longest time, and it was just wasn't it just Igor? Like I forget his name, but I think it was just him.
Really? I don't remember that.
Yeah. It was just like one dude for the longest time.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Sorry.
what happened to your
I can't.
thing, Frank?
I lost my AWS credentials and to recover that.
Will you let me upgrade everything to SSO?
Probably, yeah.
Once knew a guy
Alright,
who couldn't pronounce integer.
Wait,
I don't know.
what would integer be? All right,
I don't
Brinsley,
even
help me
know.
out here. Write it out, because I'd like to say this.
Yeah, and I mean, let me just go through this. This is super quick. So there's a use type, pretty much, right? It just queries the user up front, and then I added a mutation. Oh, sorry, and I added a mutation, which it takes whatever the form is passed in. You define the type for the form up top, user ID and name. That's what it takes, integer. And then
Wait, what?
Integer.
and then you and
Like
when you
in the
update,
jar?
I expect you return the ID and name here, and both are text. ID is not an integer. And yeah, pretty much just renders the table. Renders the profile, print out the name. Yeah.
What's this button? What does it do?
Whoop.
Oh, sorry, what does a form do? It's doing
It
update the
updates the
profile.
name, it
Okay.
looks like.
It just updates the name. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing I want to it's probably something in our like getting started guide when we write it, or like whatever our like initial tutorial thing is. I think I see a lot of people adopting GraphQL, and then they'll kind of use it in this REST CRUD way where you'll just have entity, create entity, update entity, delete entity. But with GraphQL, you want to build very granular mutations. So like this one works for a demo, like it's fine. But I think in production, you would have like a create or update name mutation. You want to have like really explicit actions so that you can trigger really explicit things off of it. And clients can always batch multiple. They can like compose multiple things together. Like I want to update the name and the email and the whatever. So like I think some portion of our docs need to help people like design their APIs a little bit.
Wait,
I think
speak
I
to
see
that.
that missing.
Yeah, speak to that a bit more. Why?
I think you would batch
why do
into
it that way?
one database query.
Sorry, say that again.
I see
Batch
like
into one
database
GraphQL
query.
So you can batch it into. So okay, I think that the thought process is you break down, instead of having a singular update customer or update user mutation, you break that out into like really explicit actions, update name, update email, whatever. So people can just do very granular things if they want, and you don't have this like huge ever growing input argument, which then at that point you don't really get type safety, right? Like it's just, if you have every single field as an input
Optional,
arg,
right?
like it's so you have these granular things, but then the question is, okay, but what if I want to do multiple things together? So on the front end, you can call multiple mutations together. You can say, I want to call these three things, pass in the args. On the back end, and this is something we need to talk about, I haven't talked about it at all in any of our demos. There are like nice patterns to batch those together into a single database, right? And Lambda specifically makes it extra easy because there's only ever one request that a Lambda function is processing. We can talk about that more separately, but yeah, there's some.
That's so. If I do this, let's say you have a name and age. By having two queries, you mean even when I hit submit, I'm calling two mutations here. One.
No, just one. So you can have multiple batch together. So from the client's point of view, it's an update profile mutation, but from the API's point of view, it's like three separate intents.
I mean, as in I do this update name and then update mutation. That's sorry, update.
Yeah, exactly.
Like this.
Yeah, there's a really great video from the guy that did GitHub's GraphQL API, and he talks a lot about the way they thought about different situations. Yeah, you want to have very specific mutations that take a small set of arguments, and that then you can actually benefit from doing all this in the first place.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this is I think Frank should be pretty familiar with this. Like, this is an issue I've always run into on how to organize this stuff.
Yeah, I think even on our construct, like for example, if you want to do like API custom domain, right? There are like so many scenarios over there where you just want to specify like a string domain. You want to as domain plus a certificate, domain plus certificate plus a host zone, or is a domain external. So ideally, we want to have like a type union of like every single case. So it's like very strong type safety. Right now, even though it's TypeScript, I feel like types are useless in there. Everything is optional.
Yeah, exactly. And GraphQL is it's an even weaker type system, so you have to be even more like intentional to keep things clear. Yeah. So I think the idea is there's stuff with this like starter and this framework, but there's also like using it effectively and like different tools. Like so like if you get these 3 mutations, like how do you make it so that's not 3 separate database calls? It probably doesn't matter for like initial version of your product, whatever, but you want to be able to efficiently write those. And there's like the data loader pattern on the back end to do stuff like that. I think we can like make like little videos on each of those things.
Brinsley has a question.
It's not about integer anymore.
No.
So he's asking, having the granular mutations queries makes a lot of sense. Is that what's in the spec these days, or just current best practice? I forgot when I was talking about this, but the GraphQL spec itself is really, really minimal. It pretty much only defines the types and kind of just really basic schema definition stuff. There's a secondary spec called Relay, which is like a higher level set of things that you should follow. So here's how you do paging. Here's how you like discover an entity given just a type in the ID, stuff like that. So definitely recommend reading the Relay spec and seeing those patterns as well. But the thing that you're talking about, granular mutations and queries, that's really just best practice. I think that's people have learned over time that not even over time, like GraphQL was initially invented for this function, but I think coming over from REST, you kind of bring over certain habits, and then it takes a while to unlearn those habits, and then you kind of think, okay, if I was doing GraphQL first and I never heard about REST, how would I do things? And this is how you would do it.
Yeah. The other one, and this was mentioned in Slack, I just sort of answered it, is the ideal stack, will it be applicable to Dynamo as well? I said we'll probably cover it after the RDS one.
And I want to show you guys quickly what that looks like.
Let's do that. Yeah.
Do you have anything else to go over on your side?
No, I was trying to wrap this up to figure out what the next steps are. But let's take a look at the Dynamo first. Yeah.
Okay. Let me try to find a simple. But this is like a bigger. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
You're trying to say what?
No, I'm just trying to stay calm because I just lost all my AWS credentials. I need to figure out how to recover those.
Wait, what did you lose?
But Jay has access to the account, right? He can just issue you new.
I have like a ton of these playground accounts. I mean, yeah, I'm just going to each and then set up the roles and stuff again. But yeah.
Oh no.
Yeah, I mean, the app didn't back it up anywhere.
It did. I removed it. I removed the app, but then I think when I removed it, it cleared out the credentials again or something, or like when I closed it. Or yeah. All right.
Okay, so real quick, so this is just a bigger project using the same stuff. So, and with that, instead of files, I have folders. But so again, we have like the business domain. So this is what I was saying earlier. When using Dynamo, because you don't need to like apply a migration, the steps are a lot simpler. So this is using the ElectroDB library, and you can just define your entity right here. So it's kind of the same thing. Like, what are the attributes? What are the types? You can specify whether it's required. Read only means it's you can only set it when you're creating it. Bunch of stuff. I'm reusing like this object here to add like create that, delete that, all that stuff. Then you can specify the indexes, so primary, secondary. And that's really it. Then you can just go directly start to write functions that use it. And you get full type safety here. There's no like code gen step or anything. Create business entity, the thing I just defined up there. You can create it. You get the type safety here, so it just asks you for the required fields. There's other stuff that's optional. You can do a get, which because you specify the indexes here, it knows what fields you need for the get. It even has this really cool feature that is find. And here you can specify any of the fields you know, and it'll figure out what index to use automatically. It's a really cool feature. I don't know if I in practice if you use it that often, but that is pretty cool. And then you can query any of your indexes. So I have the second. So this is a business. The businesses have like a namespace, which is like a friendly name, and you can query by that. So yeah, I think Frank, if you felt like the RDS one had a lot of steps, I think you'll like this because this is you just in this whole file. Every time you add a new feature, you just add everything here and you're ready to go.
Yeah. Hey Dax, can you walk through a similar thing like what Frank did of like, hey, if I was hypothetically adding a feature,
Yeah, cool. Wait, I can do that real quick. So I'm gonna add article.
By the way, somebody's watching this specifically. Maybe a quick 10-second on what is this actual setup with ElectroDB or whatever. Like.
Yeah. So this is like a bigger project that has a lot more features and functionality than what we've shown so far. It's like if you actually use our stack and built an application over the course of several months, like you would have something that looks like this. The only difference is I'm not using RDS. I'm using DynamoDB. And instead of directly using the AWS SDK client to talk to DynamoDB, I'm using this really great library called ElectroDB. It's effectively just a DynamoDB client, but it is, again, it's one of those libraries that are built TypeScript first. So if you're going to build the DynamoDB client, but you wanted to maximize TypeScript functionality, this is what you'd end up with. So this is built with that. So there's no RDS cluster in here. It's the main difference. Makes sense?
Yep.
So kind of similar to the other one. I think most of the steps are the same, but I don't have this as memorized. I'm going to have to like reference this other one here. But you import this concept of an entity from ElectroDB. And whenever you want to create a new concept in your database, you can create a new entity. It takes some high level information, like what's the name of the entity. And it uses this to like generate some of the DynamoDB single table design stuff. You can even specify version, which is cool. So if you like create a new version of this, it won't immediately overwrite the existing stuff. You can copy it over. And it has an optional service field in case you're like a multi-service application. Then you can specify the attributes that this has. So we can say that an article has a URL. What is the type? It is, and you have these different things you can be here, string, list, etc. We can say it's required. And maybe it has an ID also. String, required, read only. And finally, you specify your indexes. So you can have your primary index. The primary key in this case is going to be the ID and oh, sorry, I did this wrong. Primary key is just going to be ID. It maps DynamoDB single table design stuff. So that's why the reason we didn't do this for our starter for the first version of the ideal stack is, I think single table design is a little bit more alien to people than a relational database. But this is definitely something like I personally use, and we're definitely going to support it. Sort key, we don't really have a sort key on this. Once you have this defined, you can create, you can have like a create function. Dot create, and you can pass in a new, whatever, let's hard code this. And that's it. So all the work in core and for your backend and your business logic, when you're using the DynamoDB setup, it's all in just one file. And this is like good to go. And you can start wiring this up to your GraphQL API.
Do you need some sort of the schema file that we kind of had for the schema and builder?
Schema builder? What do you mean?
The schema.ts and builder.ts. Do we need those two
So
files?
this just affects the stuff in core. Everything else is the same.
Right. Okay.
So you would still have, I still have all this stuff here. A lot more stuff.
Yep.
Yeah. So same setup here. And I'm using some plugins here. So this can get like pretty big.
Let's see.
So DynamoDB 1 is simpler. Like, should we consider including that as part of our launch? Like, I don't think there's really much besides just including Electro.
Yeah, I guess it's a single table design thing, but
Hey, Dax, how does Pothos understand this type? In schema.ts we import a type. How does
yeah, so the pattern I've been using is I'll export a type called like, I didn't follow this exactly right. I'll usually call this article entity, and I'll call this article entity type, and ElectroDB has this nice helper that returns this. So this article entity type is like just all the fields that are available. So Pothos will be backed by this.
Got it. Right.
So this would definitely be like one of our variants or flavors or whatever. I don't think there's much, like with the RDS stuff, we did a bunch of stuff around it. Like we did the migration stuff in the console. We are like maybe exploring some of the declarative stuff. But I think for the DynamoDB one, there's not much augmentation we need to do around it.
Right. Cool. I say let's start wrapping this up, and then let's decide what the next steps are.
Yeah. Let's go through some of the notes I took. So I think some of the discrete stuff for me is I need to hide Urkel more. I need to explore how to do that. I need to explore some of the SQL stuff to see if we can make that more declarative. So you're not either you're not writing migrations or you're not writing the Kaisley types. Depending on how that goes, I might be able to hide SQL.ts or eliminate it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Those are the only two major things that I had. Sorry, also the file-based types here, but I think we'll look at that at the end.
Yeah. These two files, right? The builder.ts and schema.ts.
Yeah, I think I don't think I can. Well, we can't take away schema.ts, or sorry, we can't take away builder.ts. So that's the user's going to add stuff there. But it's exploring if schema.ts like autoloads from a folder. Yeah, I just need to make sure it might. I have to see if ES build can support glob imports. If it can't, like this, there's not like a clean way to do this.
Yeah. What do you expect users are going to put more stuff in here? Like what are the stuff they're going to put in builder.ts?
Yeah, so any Pothos plugins that they're doing, they'll probably add stuff there. You can GraphQL has a concept called custom, or it's a concept called scalars. So you can say, and they have basic ones like string, int, whatever, but you can add other ones depending on your application. Like you might add one for email, you might add one for address. Address doesn't really make sense, but you can extend like the types that are available in GraphQL, and that would go here too. Yeah.
Yep. Cool.
So when you looked at Redwood, did you feel like we had about the same amount of files as them, or like how did it compare for you?
They had a ton more. Yeah, this is. I think one thing is I think they took the model off. They want to bake in a lot of these other like just prettier, on the front end, baking the storybook.
All right, yeah, it has storybook too.
That's one thing. I think also Redwood I feel they do a lot more on the web end than they do on the API end. So on the web end, they have this concept of like pages, components, and layouts. Layout are the things that kind of like an envelope, where if you want certain pages that always have the same nav bar, you would have a layout with a nav bar and stuff in there. Pages are pretty empty, and components are. Oh yeah, they have this component of this idea of like a cell, which I don't know if you'd be kind of like limiting, but I really like it. The cell is for any database action, you always have like a loading state, an empty state, and fail and success. So this, they just by default have to have the for state there, where what to render on loading, what to render on empty, failed, and success. I feel like that's like a very easy way to demonstrate that, because otherwise we always have this like if statement checks inside like a component where it's like, is loading, then do this, right? It's not loading, do this. But I do find this might be a bit limiting down the road, where if you have two calls but you want to render the like one loading state for both of them, right? Kind of coordinating the logic between the two cells. Again, they might have these features. I didn't dig that much like advanced in there. So they have a bunch of stuff on the front end, which I do find will be pretty helpful. On the back end, right, they use Prisma, and they auto-gen the migration stuff, and there are things very CLI heavy. So everything, all the scaffolding stuff, it's done through the CLI, where you want to add a new page on the front end, right? You would generate like a page like this. They would, have all the cell, have all the layout, everything, add this to the route, everything like done for you. You could scaffold like a new database entity that would, I forgot if that, I don't think that created a migration, but on the front end, it give you a CRUD page, and with SQL all written, and on the back end, they actually create the the post entity and all the SQL types and stuff. And this is how they generate a migration. So you just add in the Prisma file, just add like a new model, and you just run this. They generate the migration file automatically based off the based off this. They auto generate the stuff on the left with the stuff on the right. I feel I didn't dig deeper into what they're doing for the for auth and stuff, but just for the as far as the API concerns, it feels like a lot of stuff's done on the front end. And the folder structure wise, it's a bit it's a lot, right? Quite a lot of stuff into kind of understand DB, the source, but a lot of them I don't have like not much idea what they are upfront. Right? Pretty striking.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think our focus has been, I think just by way of the type of support that we get in our Slack, or support requests we get in our Slack, has been helping people structure stuff on the back end better. Like no one really comes to us being like, oh, something on my front end is weird or not working. So I think that's where we spent a lot of our time. And I think it makes sense for us too. But then for them, they built a whole like front end framework, more or less. Like you can use just that, all those concepts, and on the front end as its own thing, where we don't really have as much exposure to. Here's like a better way to do things on the front end outside the how you connect to the back end.
Yeah, I think most of the questions we got on the front end are around like Amplify, right? How do I set up the
or should I use Amplify?
Nobody asked that. We only get questions from people that are regretting it.
All right, so yeah, those things that Dax said we're going to look into. Don't think we need a demo after that. What do you guys feel about just launching it after we do the research into those areas?
I want to see the quick start, like I guess the steps for the quick start, because that's going to be the way I kind of I guess evaluate it.
I think we can start writing the quick start. So
yeah.
I was going to ask. I think I've been hearing the word quick start, but I actually don't know what form that's taking. Like, are we doing? Is that like a single pager quick thing, or is that like, if you really want to learn how to use this well, the thing that you follow, and it might take you like a couple of days to work through? Like what are we going to have for the launch?
Yeah, I was thinking. Yeah, actually, go Frank.
So I think given it took some time to kind of learn Redwood. This is like a tutorial, even though it have 7 chapters, but it's
what's in the intermission?
Now you always ask the most important question. Tailwind and
I guess you can stop there.
I really like it where it's before I wasn't so big on videos, but after like going through that doc, like video just makes a lot more sense. If you want to just like this doesn't, but what's actually in the video that makes a lot of sense. It pretty much just covering all the little chapters in here. So I feel like right, and then each video is like 20 minutes. If you set the speed to 1.5x, you can finish the whole thing in an hour.
Yeah, I when I went through even the remix one, I thought that was pretty good. That gave me a sense of, so that's the type of thinking I had, was tell me about all the core concepts and walk through it in a way that makes me feel like I'm building something. So that's sort of what I was kind of looking for. I mean, it's very similar to these demos that we're doing, like pretty much like what Frank was doing. It's like, oh, to create this feature, I did this, this, and this, and and then just trying to touch every key concept. In our case, including the console, like running the migrations in the console, like the entire sort of experience, and including potentially like setting breakpoints or something, and like so the let me back up a bit. When I say quick start, it's not quick start to the ideal stack. It's quick start to SSD given the ideal stack. Does that make sense? It's like
I see. Yeah, because there's a lot of other concepts that we've already had for a while. We want to go over. That makes sense.
Because when we're thinking about the ideal stack now, we're thinking about it as the entry point for majority of the people that are using SSD. Again, you still get the flexibility of doing everything that you're currently doing. Like, we're not changing any of that. But if that is the entry point, then the quick start is a walkthrough of that entry point.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to do one single video, which is basically, here's the quick start in written format, and here's a quick start in video format. It's basically the same thing, just different medium, is what I had in mind.
I like it when you break into chapters where I feel like, okay, it's a good place to stop.
Like an intermission?
I think if you make everything inside one, yeah, or like pieces people care about, right? Database, how to connect to it. Like the first chapter is right, it's up and running with the GraphQL API and the front end, right? And how to do database, how to authentication, how to file upload, right? How do you intermission there, and then it would be more advanced stuff, right?
Well, this might be a good spot to talk about this then, Frank, because this feels a lot closer to our guide, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How would you, I guess, differentiate that from a quick start type thing? Or, again, if they converge on the same thing, that's totally fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think my initial thought is I would like to have one thing, just one thing. But I don't know if that's possible.
What do you mean, Dax? What do you mean one thing?
Because I think what's nice about this doc is I know that I just have to go through every single chapter, and then there won't be a single thing that I don't know.
Yeah,
just like
that's
one.
what I really like about it too.
Yeah. And if I don't want to go through every single thing, I can just, skim the chapters and I'll get a sense of what's there. So I kind of like that as opposed to having some, I don't know. Like I think the reason I asked about what is a quick start is as the word quick is in there, and the question is how quick, like is it is it a thing that you're gonna read in 10 minutes and get going, or is it like you're gonna sit down and like consume a bunch of stuff?
Yeah, this is why it's this is why I was using the word quick start, is because there's like a guide, which is a weekend thing, and then there's a quick start, which is, I don't think it's quite a 10-minute thing. Like, at least the remix one that I'd done wasn't like 10 minutes. It felt like half an hour to maybe an hour.
Okay.
But it seemed like it touched on most concepts. And after I was kind of done that, I was like, okay, I get what Remix is about.
Got it. So two things.
So that's again, let me preface this by saying I'm not saying this is what we should do. This is the reason why I was using the word quick in quick start.
No, I think that makes sense. But then the
point
question
that you guys,
I guess, then we would have three things, right? We would have what you just described, what me and Frank are kind of describing, like what Redwood has, and then we have the existing guide.
Yeah. So maybe that is the point of this discussion, is let's sort of figure that out a bit.
I feel right now we have 3 learning materials, or we will be having 3 learning materials, which I feel it doesn't make sense. One is this whole set of docs, right? Architecture, live Lambda, different ways to do API auth and stuff, right? There's this one set of stuff, right? Kind of like our doc. There is the quick start we're gonna do, which we haven't decided on the format and length yet, and our full-on guide. I think that this distinction between the guide and quick start will be pretty obvious, where the guide, we should go explain some of the AWS stuff more. As in, like, the guide, the quick start, right? Going over this, where it's like half an hour to an hour, right? The guide has to be, it's for people who really want to understand like things inside out, where like what is IAM, right? What is Lambda? What is API gateway? I think the guide might not be doing that good of a job yet. I think instead of letting them converge, we can intentionally make it be like actually the only book you need to understand serverless and AWS, right?
Which is sort of what the goal is.
Yeah, like we have what is serverless, what is AWS Lambda. Maybe over here we need to explain more like what is like IAM, which we kind of do, but as like API, right? What are different API options on AWS and why we're picking the API Gateway v2, right? What is DynamoDB, and like, right, what is S3? Like,
it's almost like it's supposed to be a
right,
course.
Like Cognito, why Cognito?
Yeah, Frank, I think you're lagging. Either that or I'm lagging. I'm not sure, but somebody's lagging.
I don't think I'm.
No, Dax is good.
Yeah, I think every time I say something, it takes a bit before Frank gets it and responds. So I think there's some sort of. But yeah, so that is like the way I kind of think about it is like, and we've gotten feedback about this where people are like, hey, the guide is like better than some of the Udemy or whatever sort of paid courses, and I think we want it to be on that level. It's like it's closer to a book.
Got it. So that's more around, like the majority of the stuff in there actually has nothing to do with this setup. This idea setup.
It just,
right now it
happens to use the setup. Right? Sorry, yeah, Jay.
Right. Yeah. That's it.
Yeah. There's another whole area. Like I want to have a whole thing on setting up your AWS account from the start. Like that's another area where people I think get tripped up on, and I almost feel like can go in the ideal stack guide. Maybe.
Stop using the word guide. Ideal stack guide. I don't even know that's quick start or that's our guide.
Ideal stack tutorial.
Yeah. Right. So we kind of agree that there's this guide, which it's there, and the quick start. I think the quick start should be the main learning source for SST, right? you should like Dax mentioned, right? You should understand all the core concept of SST just by going through the quick start guide.
Wait, but
It
that's
take an hour.
hang on. We have three things, right? We have our existing guide, which is the only thing we
Yep.
have right now. We're gonna have this new quick start, which Jay said was like, like 30 minutes to an hour, get a sense of what the ideal stack is about. Then I thought we were also gonna have like a deeper dive into that. And that's what you would, if you go through that, you'll have the full understanding.
I think Frank is maybe trying to converge those two. I'm not sure.
Converge the last two. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like that's what he was going towards. I'm not sure.
I know, I wasn't even aware this thing Dax mentioned. Like, the more advanced stuff, I was thinking we could put it under after the intermission. The quick start.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so that's what you're saying. That's what Jay said. You're thinking about it as one concept. Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely, that makes sense if that works.
Yeah, like
Frank, over here, what is the quick start? Like if you scroll up, what is the quick start?
This quick start is just installation.
Okay. So that's very similar to the quick start we have now. Right.
Ship it.
Okay. It's very similar to the getting started. Yeah.
Right. Sorry. No, I actually have the word quick start there. See the bottom.
What?
Oh yeah.
Oh, I see. There needs to be a spec, an official standard for all this.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a guide. There's a quick start. Instead of quick start, I think like the guide won't. It's happened to use SST, but you'll be more around the AWS setup, right? What is AWS? I was thinking the SSO thing could go in there as well, right? Depends, right? Like, but I don't want people to read out these stuff first. I want people to, look at how to install and then jump into tutorial right away. And not tutorial, jump into the quick start right away. In the quick start, we should kind of explain to them what are the constructs, what are the how, like, or full stack setup, and then inside each chapter it would be how to do authentication in ideal stack, how do you do auth in ideal stack, and after intermission you could or at the bottom you could have, okay, like the quick start uses RDS. What if I want to use Dynamo? Or what if you want to use Auth0 for auth? You would have a section.
So all this like usage section.
Yeah. All these would be like appendix for the quick start.
Okay.
Have you seen the beta React docs? They kind of have what Frank is describing. There's a single set of things to work through. I think it's just beta.reactjs.org.
Yeah, it feels like they're putting a lot of work into it.
And people love it.
Really?
So if you go to the Learn tab on the left.
That's called learn. I always like the word learn. Like Next.js call it learn. I like it. It's a really good description of what I want to do.
Yeah.
So you want to learn SST, like that's the thing you're saying, as opposed to the guide being like you're learning how to build a serverless application.
Yeah. So if you look at Learn, they have there's these sections on the left. They have like an obvious installation section, and they have a quick start section, which is probably that like 30-minute. If you do the quick start and you do the thinking in React part, it's probably like, I would say probably 30 minutes if you like really work through all of it. And then they have sections for the other concepts. So it's not going to map exactly the same to us, but I think that's the idea, right? Like you have one quick start you work through, and then there's higher level concepts. And we might have a section called databases and how to set up different ones, or we might have, authentication, things like that, or authorization, like the context stuff that I want to add eventually.
Yeah. Hey, Dex, what do people like about this?
I think when people step through it, they find that it's just written really well and organized really well, and it kind of exposes people to concepts in a good way. Like it has like little playgrounds and stuff too. It's like they put a lot of effort into it.
Yeah. And is this layout like a open source thing, or?
Yeah, this is much better than Docusaurus or the default.
I don't
Docusaurus.
think this is, because I think they're building this site as though it was like a product.
Oh.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to try some other stuff, I really like Retype, and Stripe just put out their own thing, but that seems more for like API docs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's see. Okay. So that kind of makes sense, right? Like I think with quick start, I don't want to have all these sections with the quick start. Like what should I read first? So I want the quick start to be the main thing, or learn to be the main thing, and just these to happen to describe all the advanced setup or variations. Well, some of these concepts, like environment variable stuff, they would go into the learn guide, right? Working with our team probably won't go in there, right? Testing might go in there. Monitoring source, all these won't. Right. So some, like one or a couple of these chapters might make it to the learn guide. But I guess it's pretty clear the learn guide needs to go over all the SSC concept and be time boxed to like 30 minutes to an hour. And you break it down into chapters, and hopefully we have like a 10-20 minute video for each chapter. Does that make sense? So it will be, I think we can live with the current format, but you would just be, get started or installation, and then learn.
Yeah.
Everything else is advanced or something. It would just, everything else would go below here. Yeah. Or we put like a learn here. We add an extra button here called learn, extra tab. So learn, construct, guide, about an example.
I think making learn kind of a top level thing makes sense.
It does make sense, but I don't want people to start reading this page, Um,
Well, all this would fall under learn, right? Or what do you mean?
and then what's on this page? What is on ST? Maybe this page doesn't have anything.
Or this page just has like links to all those. Yeah, actually, it's a good point.
I was thinking that because I think that makes sense. Yeah, this also I don't like this being a button, being like a tab. I know if you guys felt
Wait,
that.
which one? No, which one?
The or logo
Yeah,
being
that's
a
what you're
tab.
saying. Like that the logo itself is a tab in the header.
Well, I don't quite get it. What do you mean?
Because like we have a page for construct, a page for guide, a page for about, and we also have this home page, which is under the logo technically.
I prefer like a home instead of.
Like he's saying we should have like something called learn, and that should just be highlighted when you go to the home page.
I can't believe Brinsley is still around. And
wait, hold on. Hold on. You mean like clicking SST and clicking learn would do the same thing? Is that
no?
Yeah,
I think you could, but the point is right now, this being the home tab, it feels weird. I feel like there should be like a home tab.
I see.
And then if you click this, you just goes to the home tab.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, sort of. Yeah. I don't think. I think people are used to the logo being the home tab. At least that's what I thought. No.
Well, the React docs I just linked do what Frank is
do
saying. They like call out specifically this is home.
Oh, I see.
I think this.
Wait, what does clicking on the React logo do then?
Nothing. Well, nothing if
no, it goes home.
Yeah, it takes you back if you're not there.
Right. So it's one explicit whole thing, I guess.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, what's Brinsley saying? What did you say?
Yeah, I think what he's saying is kind of what I'm thinking. Like you have learn at the top. Yeah. We still need constructs. That's like a very specific thing for us.
Yeah.
I think guide might need a different name in this context because like it's confusing. Like what's a guide?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Should we just start calling it a book? Yeah. Like ebook, book.
Yeah.
Because I mean that's what people are downloading. They're downloading the ebook.
All right. So for the next step, so Dax will start like working through those. These chapters, I feel strongly about we should start writing these chapters just to have like a mental framework of like what we're going to them.
Yeah. Just you're saying just even defining what the chapters are.
Yeah. And start shuffling stuff around.
Yeah.
Dax, do you feel strongly about like doing that, or?
I haven't put much thought into that yet. So if you feel like you have a sense of it, I can kind of build off of whatever you have, whatever you're thinking.
Okay, then yeah, actually I feel kind of strongly about it. Let me start structuring stuff and just have a high level point for the chapters, and then we could just take a look to see if that layout makes sense.
Yeah, like these buttons that we have, or these panels or whatever, we should outline like these are the 3 ways or 2 ways, whatever, to get started, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Which is kind of what it is, right? It's like learn, read the book, look at some examples.
Yeah. Okay. Let's set a date for that. Are we too early to set a date for the launch of the IDEO stack?
I think we could talk about this on Sunday, because there are some other things I wanted to talk about in regards to that as well. But yeah, or like we can talk about it and then set a date. I don't know if I'm like ready to set a date just yet.
Dax, what
for the launch, that is. Yeah.
Sorry.
So Dax, would you?
Yeah, you were going to say something.
No, I don't think so. Well, I think the only thought was, I think if we're ready to launch with just the stuff that we listed, there's not that much to do. I mean, depending if I find some good options for RDS or not. Yeah. So I think most of the work will be writing this stuff.
Yeah, there was the in Frank's demo, he used the Cognito package that we have, and I remember the last demo we were talking about not doing it.
Yeah, we're not going to have that in there.
Okay. Right, you remember that one, Frank?
Yeah.
Then you're okay with that still? Wait, is Frank frozen? No, he's not frozen.
No. My head is
frozen,
but I'm not frozen. Yeah. I think to me either way is fine because we're committed to keep iterating on this.
Yeah. And I think I'm getting a little bit more clarity on the auth stuff. So I think to be
honest, I'm like 50-50 on, or like I'm rather like 60-40 on using Cognito versus rolling out or plugging into like a self-hosted thing. But I'm up for having more docs or examples on integrating the IDEO stack with Auth0. I think my claim is that for people that are using want to like do native AWS stuff, like Cognito is fine, apart from not able to generate the JWT token. But for a lot of other people, they having integrations.
Yeah, I think what I realized is I wanted to start from a different place. I want to like this idea of this context thing, like this object that gets loaded in the beginning of a request and is kind of available everywhere, and it'll have asserts on it to do things like permissioning, like to get the right tenant if you're doing multi-tenant. I think I want to figure more of that stuff out first. And if that becomes more clear, I think that's actually where most of the value is. And then the session management part could just happen like separately. Like you just validate the session, whatever it is, and load it into the context. And from there, it didn't really matter where it came from. If it came from, Cognito or somewhere else. So I think if I get that further and I can like demo that, I think auth will start to look like less important, but like in a good way. Like it's not like a big part of it. It's just really just authenticating some like some kind of token, and that can happen in any way.
Agree. Yeah.
Because I think I understood this when I was talking to, I don't know if you saw, there was a thread for someone who's been struggling with getting Auth0 up for the past couple days. I haven't really been able to help that much because I don't fully understand. Like I've never went through that flow, but yeah, I finally talked to him today, and he was explaining to me what he was trying to do. And I realized if we just provide, and like it seems like he's setting up Auth0. Like it seems like that's the thing he's trying to do. But what he's actually trying to do is just set up access and permissioning, authorization, not authentication, the authorization side. And it seems like this authentication side is going to help you do the other thing, but they can actually be completely unrelated. So most of the pain points on the authorization side. So if we build a great way to do all of that, that is kind of clear to me that the authentication side doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of these integration stuff, it for now I'm fine with just having them as examples. Right? How do you do authentication with Auth0, authentication with Cognito? Having them as examples are fine.
I mean, that could be one of those advanced sections.
Yeah. And I guess we need to provide, I guess, some sort of package. But even without the package, I think if we just show them the files they need to, on the front end, create an auth folder and drop all the use provider and all these things like kind of DAX wrapped into the right package, just having those files there and ask them to, put in the auth folder. I think that's good enough. When we don't have it baked into the framework, IDEO stack.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, then for the quick start, for the learn guide, we're going to start using this a model when we try to document the variations. I think we won't have all the variations on there, but when we do add a variation, I think let's just do this. Just create an example, provide them the code, and yeah. I was just thinking, like, if you want to do a Dynamo single table instead of RDS, right? Just those two files, right? In core, right? DAX was kind of showing. We just show them, all right, do this, do that, and everything else is the same. I think at this point we don't need to make our starter to be able to generate auto-gen different variations. The example is good.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I'm just trying to piece all the docs together. I think in the advanced section it would be database options, and then you go there's like
there's a document for each one. Yeah,
DynamoDB, PlanetScale, Mongo. Right now we just have DynamoDB in there. When you click, we'll show you the code snippet, and then there's a view example button where you could we actually do have an example for this where you could clone that. You could, the example, right? I think the order we can go into is we'll always have this page first, like other database options and DynamoDB. We have this page with code snippet first. If more people ask for it, we can add an example, right? If a lot of people want to use that, we'll bake into the IDEO stack. We can go in this direction. Yeah. Okay. So we'll decide on Sunday when we are launching this, and we will start putting the guide, the learn stuff together.
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
All right. Anything else?
No, I think that's it. I need to go something.
All right.
All right. On the stream.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah.